I'm here with Kevin Pollak.
Or Pollak, depending on what side of the Mississippi you're from.
He's the star of The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel.
Co-star, but sure, thank you, award-winning. It's not important.
A comedian, of course, as you can tell.
Uh-huh.
An actor. And a podcaster.
Pioneer. It's no big deal.
No big deal. Good to be here with you.
It must be. I mean, you too.
So tell me, early in your career, you got started as a stand-up comic.
It's true,
as a teenager.
Yeah.
What was the biggest fear of getting on stage the first time?
There was never a fear. I think that's why I started so young, because it seemed I was more comfortable on stage performing than in a, conversation like this.
And you are a pioneer of getting involved in media like podcasting as well as, your Amazon show. Like, what draws you to these new mediums, and why? How do you know what to do next and what mediums to try?
I started the Kevin Pollak Chat Show. All episodes still available on YouTube, technically, even though we wrapped up 10 years a couple of months ago. I started in 2009, and I had to explain to people what a podcast was when I invited them to be on the show. But, I ended up getting the longest on-camera interview that people had ever given, be it, Larry David, Tom Hanks, Elon Musk. It's a very long list, somewhat annoying. But I was always fascinated by people's journeys. How did you get from there to here? I read autobiographies as a kid, while I was dreaming about doing a show like I am right now. And then in terms of my new world in Amazon Studios and Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, that wasn't me deciding, I want to work on a streaming platform. That was a couple of brilliant creators and showrunners, and Amy Sherman and Dan Palladino, who just reached out and said, do you want to join the circus? And it was a easy yes, knowing their exceptional work and also watching the pilot. So that chose me, whereas, I dove face first into the podcast world, just from my fascination with wanting to interview people. I through movies and whatnot, I'd been on the other side of that, being interviewed, and the one-on-one with no studio audience was my favorite. I'll just say it, Charlie Rose, because he was a lot less handsy than allegedly. So that was, sort of impetus behind my effort.
Yeah, with all these interviews, what was some of the biggest lessons you've learned, not just about interviewing, but about the people you spoke to, and how did it change you?
Well, the biggest lesson was, because it was pointed out to me during some of these interviews, that I was better at listening than I thought. I'd spent my life talking and hoping others would listen. But I booked the show myself, so I was genuinely curious about each journey. So the surprise for me was that I was better at listening than I imagined.
What do you think was the most interesting part of your journey?
Doing the show?
No, just overall in your whole career.
Oh my goodness.
What was a big standout moment, and what did it
There's
mean
been too many. The big surprise is that it happened, and the next biggest surprise is that it's still happening. I mean, I put out a book a couple years ago called How I Slept My Way to the Middle. Not just a funny title, and technically still available on Amazon. And in it I talked a lot about the journey and the surprises along the way, because they're endless if you're open to them. And there's never a moment that isn't an education if you're also open to that. So it's been a learning process the whole way. And still, I mean, those of us working on The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel are sort of amazed every day that the work is fulfilling and rewarding. The relationships are growing and flourishing. The support from Amazon Studios is unlike anything any of us have ever experienced in terms of a positive. And then the audience around the world's reaction, no one could have predicted in a crazy imagination. So all of this is yet another chapter in education.
Yeah, and you've been in over 80 movies.
I don't know the exact number, 87, but I will say that 6 of them are quite good.
And what do you think is the key to having a sustainable career like you've had? If you were to give advice to like a young actor.
Yeah, I learned early on to diversify. That now more than ever, you're limited by your imagination in terms of what you can do. You don't have to wait. I sort of created a mantra about 10 years ago. If you're not creating, you're waiting. As artists, we're taught to wait for the phone to ring. But I say be more proactive in everything you do, your work and your life. This is it, as it turns out, as far as we know.
Yeah,
It's not a dress rehearsal.
Tell me about your preparation before shows, before podcasts. What do you do? A lot of research? Do you watch clips?
It all depends, by a project to project. Preparation is the key to happiness in any situation. So yeah, I like to be over prepared and early.
Who was an early mentor to you? Someone you learned a lot from that really helped you?
Barry Levinson, first real movie I did was one of his Baltimore set movies, Avalon, and he had come from comedy. He was a stand-up, and he sort of followed a path of being a writer and director early, things that I had thought about and wanted to do and now have. And so I remember he pulled me aside on the set. I had a birthday when we were shooting. And he pulled me aside and said, "Happy birthday." And, I come from stand-up comedy, and here I am in this sort of sweeping family saga drama. And he said, "You're really good in this, and let me just suggest the next thing you do should not be filled with hijinks," which was a comedian's way of saying, take your work seriously. You might be good at this. Don't just do silly.
How did your career as a stand-up comedian prepare you for being in movies and TV shows? What skills transferred over?
Just being super comfortable in my own skin. Because I started stand-up so early, I had no formal training as an actor. I'm not proud of that, it just happens to be a fact. So it was only because I had done a dozen or more years of stand-up comedy and had, lived through what that means to get on stage, and moment by moment, the audience will tell you whether you're any good. And it's the ultimate emotional roller coaster. And it hardens you to defeat and disappointment and rejection. So by the time I got to auditions, rejection was already a part of my language. And it didn't faze me the way I saw it faze so many others, in terms of, early on just realizing, well, this is a numbers game. And most of these are not going to go my way. So I've got to get better at just being in the room. And anyways, being present on stage helped me to be present first at auditions and then on set. My strength may be just that, being present.
How do you view failures and mistakes?
As an opportunity to grow. Yeah, that's a tough lesson, but boy, learn it fast. Failures and mistakes are the key to ultimate happiness. It sounds weird, but yeah, just winning all the time and succeeding, man oh man, does that get confusing in those brief moments. So if it lasted, I don't know what the hell I'd do.
And what's your best piece of career advice?
Be prepared to give your life to it. There's no plan B. If you hope to have any chance against the so-called competition, you just got to work harder and longer and faster and better and stronger and open-minded to mistakes and failures. So, yeah, give your life to it or get out.
Thank you.
Get out fast.
Awesome.
All right.
My friend.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.